Mr. Speaker, sir, this budget was indeed eagerly anticipated, and for good reason. We've had last year, in 2019, the worst economic performance of this country in the last 15 years. Never for 15 years have we had an economic growth of merely 3%. And the last time that we had such a bad performance was when Honorable Pravin Jagnnath was himself Minister of Finance. So the budget was eagerly anticipated because people wanted to know how the structural issues, how the structural defects of our economy were going to be addressed by the Minister of Finance. But there were other reasons too. The Financial Action Task Force grey list, Mr. Speaker, including Mauritius, and now the EU blacklist have cast a long shadow, a dark black shadow, over not only our financial services, but also on the whole of our economy, even the real economy, as people say. And Mr. Speaker, there have been huge governance issues. The 7 billion rupee loss as bad debts of State Bank of Mauritius, Mr. Speaker, and the programmed death of Air Mauritius, both point to huge governance issues in the public sector and public and government-owned companies. And of course, to add to this, we've had the coronavirus, the virtual shutdown of the economy, and the complete closure of our borders. So there were real issues to be dealt with in this budget. It can therefore only be highly regrettable that this budget did not give hope, but brought confusion. Even today, people are confused. I've listened to the Honourable Minister of Labour. His speech was a little bit muddled, Mr. Speaker. I couldn't hear properly with his mask. So I'm not very much better off as far as what is being proposed by government for unemployment, transitional unemployment benefit, technical unemployment. I'm still confused. And so, Mr. Speaker, this budget is precise on minor issues of little importance to the nation and explains en passant only what it proposes on major issues, as if, I've been Minister of Finance, as if these measures were not ready. They were announced, but were not ready. And therefore, when they were not ready, they were just like that, announced en passant. We know that even today, the Mauritius Investment Company, the details haven't been finalized. And I wonder whether some of the other things have been finalized and were just announced. So, Mr. Speaker, measures badly conceived and badly prepared. I was looking for a term to describe this budget, and I have to say it in French, Mr. Speaker. C'est un budget préparé par des apprentis sorciers. Et des apprentis sorciers. And I went to the dictionary to find the definition in case I didn't want to say something stupid. And if, Mr. Speaker, what is the definition of apprenti sorcier? Un apprenti sorcier est défini comme une personne qui déchaîne des événements qu'elle est incapable de contrôler. And for me, all these announcements, the changes that the Minister of Finance has proposed, badly, without consultation, of his own volition, smack, Mr. Speaker, of an apprenti sorcier, first time Minister of Finance, not really knowing what the impact and the real impact of his measures are going to be. So, Mr. Speaker, au lieu de relancer l'économie, this budget fragilise la reprise et surtout détruit la confiance, l'esprit de partenariat. Un budget rejeté par tous, the first time in so many years, rejeté par tous, syndicats, employeurs, professionnels et surtout les économistes. Yes, et surtout les économistes, Mr. Speaker, sir. And then, therefore, Mr. Speaker, a budget that is not fit for a time when our livelihood is threatened and our reputation is being destroyed. So I'll deal with, first of all, l'actualité de la semaine. On Monday, 8th June, a day to remember, Mr. Speaker, because on that day, and I'm happy that the Minister of Financial Services will speak after me, because I have a number of questions for him. On that day, Mr. Speaker, our presence on the blacklist of the EU became final. On that day, the government are always saying it is provisional, it can be contested and rejected by the Conseil européen and by the Parlement européen. But that, as far as I understand, on the Monday, 8th of June, that 1 month delay expired without any rejection of the act délégué from the... Okay, I'm doing my best, Mr. Speaker. You have gestured, you haven't told. Now you're telling. Now, on that day, Mr. Speaker, sir, our blacklist became final. Our presence on the blacklist became final. And in all fairness, the population was allowed to be told by government that information, should have been told that information, and should have also been told by the population, by the government, as to what was expected from now on. We are now on the blacklist final. How do we get out of it? But I'll come to that, Mr. Speaker, in a moment. So on that day, the blacklist became final. And the same issue, same type of issue, same problem relating to the same type of issue also happened. The World Bank issued its damning statement as to the sanctions that it will take against Burnmeister, BWSC, in a contract involving the CB, in a sale made to the CB, worth some 4.5 billion rupees. Sorry? What did I say? Oh, sorry, excuse me. African Development Bank. I got carried away. Quite right. Thank you. African Development Bank issued that warning, that statement, Mr. Speaker, for bribes paid to the Mauritian administration and others. Now, these bribes, I think, occurred 2015, 2016, not sure when exactly. But the fact remains that BWSC, Burnmeister, published as far back as February 2019 on its website and informed the CEB and presumably informed the African Development Bank that it had taken cognizance, had been made aware of a bribe being paid to Mauritian officials, and a bribe being paid to Mauritian officials, and this bribe, Mr. Speaker, sir, was paid to Mauritian officials and resulted in 5 of its employees being sacked, 5 employees of Burnmeister. This fact was known more than a year ago. CEB was formally apprised of this more than a year ago. CEB entered into correspondence with them more than a year ago. And my information, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that the board of CEB were verbally informed of the situation. Now, can we imagine a government that has zero tolerance for corruption, has 2 members, 2 ministries represented on the board of CEB, and the people who have paid the bribes have all been sanctioned. And the people who have accepted up to 1 billion rupees of bribes, we don't know what they are. Oh, really? As if the government today is waking up to this fact. This is not, Mr. Speaker, acceptable in normal times, and especially now, in the week that the EU have put us on the blacklist. In fact, what we are saying to the EU is that you were right, you were bloody right to put us on the blacklist, because we knew of a substantial fraud and corruption in our country for the last year, and we did nothing about it, Mr. Speaker. That is what we're telling the CEB, and that is what we're telling the EU. And that is a very serious matter. It is a very serious matter, because my deepest wish, when I think of the 15,000 people working in our offshore, who today are not sleeping because of the blacklist. And yesterday I was speaking to a major management company in the global business sector. It had sampled, Mr. Speaker, its clients. And you know what he told me? he told me that 70% of the clients are saying that they will consider leaving Mauritius if we remain on the blacklist. And we are on the blacklist. The sanctions will take effect in October. So I'd like to ask the Honourable Minister, talking after me, firstly, why he made no statement to the House concerning the events of Monday and the finalization of the blacklist. Secondly, what was the nature and the conclusion of the phone call between the Prime Minister and Mr. Michel, President of the Parlement Européen, whether any commitments have been made and whether there is any light at the end of the tunnel following that phone call. What are now going to be the objectives of government? The third question, whether government will seek to first come out of the FATF grey list before being taken off the EU blacklist, or whether they have obtained some sort of comfort that we may address ourselves directly to the EU to be able, perhaps, maybe our only chance, to come out of the blacklist by October. And finally, what are the measures that are being taken to address the 5 deficiencies? And the 5 deficiencies, Mr. Speaker, so let's see what were the 5 deficiencies. The 5 deficiencies relate directly to institutional failure in Mauritius. The same failures that have brought SBM down, that have brought the Mauritius down, and that is plaguing this government, Mr. Speaker. And the CEB affair, I must say also, institutional failures. And what does the EU blame us for? And I quote now from the EU statement, Mauritius, failure to demonstrate that law enforcement authorities have the capacity to conduct money laundering investigations, including parallel financial investigations and complex cases. But that is a fact. The CEB shows that it is a fact. Was it not here a few years ago when I asked the PNQ to the Prime Minister about the Alvaro Sobrino affair? Was it not the person who brought, I don't know if it was a true letter to ICAC or a fictitious letter to ICAC, to say that the affair, the Sobrino affair, had been referred to ICAC? And we never heard anything else. In fact, we never hear anything else, ever, whenever a member of government is referred to ICAC. And this is the sort of thing, the sort of example that we're giving to the European Union. And I must say, quite sincerely, Mr. Speaker, if we do not deal properly, fast and aggressively regarding the CEB affair, we will never get off the blacklist, because we will be showing to the EU exactly what they do not want to see and they do not like in this country. And I will say, Mr. Speaker, that what is needed is an immediate commission of inquiry, as has been asked by yourselves, our party, and the leader of the opposition. An immediate commission of inquiry chaired by a judge, sitting or retired, I don't mind, but please spare us, Mr. Duma. By a sitting judge, by a judge. And pending the conclusion of that we have that Honorable Colin Davelu, his sidekicks, Mr. Siti Naidu and the rest, that they all resign. Let's hope for them that they are cleared by the Commission of Inquiry. But the reputation of Mauritius dictates that we take appropriate action and vigorous action now. Why do I mention Honorable Commissioner? The Prime Minister was wrong. I was not in government. PMSD was not in government in 2014 when the first tender. But we were in government on 2015-16 for the second tender. That was an MSM PMSD government. Alliance, whatever, I can't remember the name. But I remember, Mr. Speaker, that Honorable Xavier Luc personally brought this Saint-Louis, this Burnmeister affair, to government. On numerous occasions, he came up with it. So he was personally involved. He personally gave the certificate of urgency. He must, therefore, not only as a minister in charge of CEB, but as a person who dealt with the file himself. He said in a statement in the House, the first file that was on my table, he said, I quote, by memory, first file that was on my table when I joined government was the famous Saint Louis power station project. So it is for that reason, not for any other reason, that I'm saying that Honorable Xavier Luc must resign now. And his sidekicks must resign. Let the commission of inquiry happen, and let, Mr. Speaker, the conclusions come out. Because we have no faith in ICAC or the other institutions of Mauritius. Neither has the Financial Action Task Force any faith in them, neither has the European Union any faith in them. So that, Mr. Speaker, that is the issue. So our priority is to get off the blacklist, and I hope we don't come into the blame game. But I took cognizance this morning of a press statement that the previous minister made. It's interesting, perhaps, if I should read just a little bit of what he said. Previous Minister Hon Xavier. I think he was not an angel himself, huh? But this is what he said. This is what he said, Mr. Speaker, sir. Il blâme le gouvernement de ne pas avoir donné assez de moyens et de pouvoirs aux institutions comme l'Independent Commission Against Corruption et la police. Mr. Speaker, ce ne sont pas des mesures qui concernent directement le ministère des Services financiers. Elles avaient surtout trait à l'ICAC et la police. That's the 5 measures which the Honourable Minister has commented on so many occasions. So, elle avait surtout trait à l'ICAC et la police, et pour des raisons que vous devinez. This is a member, I presume, of the MSM still, an ex-minister of the MSM. Et pour des raisons que vous devinez, on n'a jamais permis à certaines institutions d'évoluer en toute liberté. Now, if the European Union sees that, my friend, we are cooked. We are cooked. And this is the minister in charge of the file saying that he was in charge of the file for the last 5 years or so, 3 years or so. So there you go. This is the soup in which this government has put this country into, Mr. Speaker, sir. Now, going to other issues. So before I finish, I'll ask the government, members of the government, to read a book which is called Why Nations Fail. Very interesting book, co-written by someone called James Robinson. And it tells you there, Mr. Speaker, that nations succeed, not because of any mineral wealth that they may have. There are so many examples around Africa, but because of the institutions, the man-made institutions that are created. And they fail because man-made institutions fail. And Mauritius does not deserve to be a failed nation, Mr. Speaker, sir. As I go on, Mr. Speaker, again, as I go on, I'd say that the time now is not for the blame game. The time now, I hope the minister will take my request seriously and come up with a serious speech as to the events from Monday and how we see the future. 15,000 families will wait for your statement in a moment. And this leads me also to Senegal, Mr. Speaker, very quickly. It is our fault. Our fault that Senegal has denounced our treaty. The Prime Minister met the President of Senegal, Macky Sall, who I know, and promised that we would meet in November. Isn't that right? That we would meet in November. Not we, that the ministries would meet in November to thrash out a new double taxation agreement. But the November 2019 appointment was cancelled for reason of elections, and no new appointment given. And under pressure in Senegal, Macky Sall denounced the treaty. And that is, and Mr. Speaker, so this is why here it is opportune for me to ask for a rethink of our approach to Africa. Rethink, un autre regard. We need an emotional relationship, Mr. Speaker, with Africa. We should declare ourselves as the Africa Financial Center. The Indian issues are finished. Europe now has put us on a blacklist. We only have our friends in Africa. We should now restyle ourselves as the African Financial Center. We have much to offer to Africa. Not just like India, we had only tax concessions, but Africa we have much more. We have our laws, our political and economic stability, our court system, our lawyers, our accountants, our fund managers, our stock exchange. So, Mr. Speaker, let's move away, as far as Africa is concerned, from fiscal advantages. Let us offer ourselves to renegotiate any harmful tax clauses that may be left in the 13 DTAs, double taxation agreements that are left with Africa. And let us, Mr. Speaker, expand the number of IPPAs, investment promotion and protection agreements that we have with Africa, which are as important as DTAs, maybe more important than double taxation agreements. We should expand. We have only 5 in force. I signed a few, but they were never ratified after I left by the African countries. We need, Mr. Speaker, to expand our IPPAs and offer ourselves with a new vision of our relationship with Africa. Not a relationship which seeks to siphon up their taxes. They need it as much as we do, maybe more. We should offer to renegotiate if there are harmful clauses in any of these treaties, not wait for them to denounce them. There are only 13 left out of 54 countries. And, Mr. Speaker, we should offer this new partnership to Africa. Mr. Speaker, the other pillars are not faring much better. Agriculture. Minister Siratan will speak after me. He was the Minister of Agriculture. He will know that under his mandate, previous mandate, land under sugar cultivation has fallen by another 1,000 hectares under his mandate, Mr. Speaker. Export of sugar has constantly fallen, and in 2019 we exported 70,000 tons of sugar less than we had done in 2014 under his mandate, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we were promised last year to have some reforms proposed by the World Bank. Nothing came out. This year, this budget, no mention of the World Bank. But worse, Mr. Speaker, I think a lot of people are talking about food security and all that. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, do you know that land under food crops cultivation in Mauritius has fallen under his mandate by 1,200 hectares, by 1,200 hectares from 2014 to 2019, 15%. And tonnage produced by 20,000 tons has fallen. From 100,000 tons, this is in Statistics Mauritius, you can go and check, to 94,000 tons. That is the figures that I have, and I can back it up. Now, Mr. Speaker, agricultural policy has been a disaster under this and the previous government. Onions, I think onions has fallen by half the production of onions in Mauritius. And it's not any better in Rodrigues, huh? But Rodrigues is even worse. How much time? Okay. I'm told I have time, with your permission, of course. Now, manufacturing, same thing, Mr. Speaker. Dramatic fall in exports. 95 billion rupee export in 2014, 79 billion rupee export in 2019. And we are told this time again, we're going to have another report. The report for sugar hasn't come out yet. We're going to now commission a report for manufacturing. And construction, I'm not going to dwell on it because people have said it is misguided, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is only in the MSM School of Economics that you give so much attention to construction, because construction is Mauritius. All of it is imported, especially big, even the firms, the labor, the cement, everything is imported. So, except for the macadam. So, Mr. Speaker, this is why Concentration on construction has given us an all-time record low, 15-year record low of growth in 2019. Now, I'm proposing, Mr. Speaker, that all non-essential construction should be postponed, and all construction, wherever possible, that are being done by foreigners should be similarly postponed, Mr. Speaker, sir, because obviously there will be some, and we should give priority to Mauritian entrepreneurs all the way. Now, Mr. Speaker, we've seen high taxation, and I'll come to that in a minute. Dramatic depreciation in the rupee, 15% in 1 year, and no mention at all in the budget. And people are asking, Mr. Speaker, sir, after the bad times that we had in the 1970s, whether with this government we haven't gone from Ringo to Renga. This is what people are asking. High taxation, big depreciation, Ringo to Renga. And this is not what we want in this year, in the 2020s, Mr. Speaker, sir. Now, nothing, as I mentioned, to allay the fears of all the Mauritians concerning the dramatic depreciation of the rupee. And now I come to this 40% top rate, Mr. Speaker, sir. No one is refusing to contribute to the COVID effort. But Mauritius is not a high tax jurisdiction. I ask the government not to make a mistake between high tax rates and high tax revenues. They are not the same. Often they're contradictory. The higher the tax rate, often, the lower the tax rate. And I'll give you an example, Mr. Speaker, because all Ministers of Finance, I thought, knew this. I'll give you the example, Mr. Speaker, of 2008. On the 6th June 2008, Ramasitanen announced a drop of the income tax rate, halving of the income tax rate from 30% to 15%. That was in June 2008. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? In the following year, income tax receipts increased from 10.5 billion rupees to 13.5 billion rupees. This is history, Mauritian history, Mauritian financial history. Drop of half in the top tax rate, 30 to 15%, increase of 3 billion rupees in income tax revenues, because you get better compliance and higher economic activity. So, Mr. Speaker, we have now this 40% tax, which I and many others will be happy to pay, perhaps a less reasonable amount, if it went to a definite fund, and if that fund was administered during the COVID period, and its aftermath, in a transparent way, with good governance, not the way that is being proposed at the moment, Mr. Speaker. It is dangerous. It may lead to a number of undesired consequences. And now, Mr. Speaker, let's come to this 9% CSG. We were offered this, we were presented with a CSG, contribution sociale généralisée, as if it was a pension contribution. But when you look at the estimates, you see clearly that it is treated like any other tax. It is 3 billion rupees of tax that is being put in the budget as from next year, taking social security contributions from 1 billion rupees to 4 billion rupees. That is what it is doing. And now, I asked a question this morning, because this money, we understand now, is going to use to top up the pension universelle. This is what we have been told this morning. Now, who is going to contribute? Firstly, who gets pension universelle? Everybody gets pension universelle. 100% of the population above 60 years old. Everybody, whether you are a public servant or whether you work in the private sector, you get your pension universelle. 9,000 rupees, due to go up to 13,500. But why should it be that the CSG only it will be paid by the private sector employees? This is, in the whole hoo-ha, is what I understood. Can you imagine that only private sector employees will, together with their employer, pay 9% of the salary to any amount? when this will not apply to the public sector, whereas that money will be used to pay both the public sector retirees and the private sector. There is something really dramatically wrong, must be corrected, Mr. Speaker, sir. Now, someone was telling me this morning that he was obviously a professional guy, that he would work from January to July for the government, and for July, from August to December, he will work for his family and himself. Because, in fact, when you add together all this, the taxes that this government is imposing will reach 60% or 58.5% of remuneration. When you take the 40% top rate, the 9% CSG, the NSF, National Saving Fund, 3.5%, trading levy 1.5%, and the PGRF 4.5%. So again, Mr. Speaker, let's look at the situation of small island states. Are the Seychellois stupid? Can I ask you a question? Are the Seychellois stupid when the tax rate on Seychelles is 15%? Are the Maldivians stupid when the tax rate, top tax rate in Maldives is also 15%? I don't want to mention Bahamas, 0%, Cayman Islands, 0%. Are these people going to have their heads? Seychelles is the richest country in Africa, ahead of Mauritius. But you understand, when you are small, you need to work, you need to attract, you need to be attractive. And so there's taxes that were going to reach 58.5%. We need to tread carefully, Mr. Speaker. It may have a negative impact. As I mentioned, lowering of tax rates in the past has brought higher tax revenues, and the government needs not high tax rates as if to punish certain people, but it needs high revenues to cater for its lavish expenditure. And lavish is the word for this government. So we need high tax revenues, we need to encourage companies. And Mr. Speaker, sir, this situation will encourage our own companies from moving out of Mauritius and headquartering elsewhere. And that is also a danger that we will face with this situation. It will discourage new investments, and of course, Mr. Speaker, it is going to be discriminatory vis-à-vis non-citizens. Can you imagine a serious Minister of Finance in any country? Let's say England. I can't remember his name, it's Rishi something, Sobnak, saying in Parliament that from now on, he will tax English residents at 40%, but foreigners at 15%, doing the same job, doing the same business. Is that fair? Can you be a hairdresser and pay 40% tax on Mauritian, and your next door neighbor is a foreigner, also a hairdresser, and he's paying 15%? That is unfair and intolerable, Mr. Speaker. I have a little bit of time left. I don't want to get carried away, but the lowering of the limits for investment here to 2 million rupees is going to endanger a lot of people. When I was Minister of Tourism, I tried to do my best to encourage Mauritians to work in Mauritian hotels. Because we accept it or not, foreigners have an added advantage on us. They speak better French. They speak better English. They've gone probably to better schools, better universities, and will come here. And they actually compete with Mauritians. They may wipe out whole sectors, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, I am against, Mr. Speaker, the lowering of the thresholds for investment to 2 million rupees only. And for foreign residents, I brought foreign residents the first thing in 1999. It was 500,000 rupees when I brought it in 1999. And it has now, 20 years later, whatever, been brought to 350,000. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to be long. BOM financing, Bank of Mauritius Finance, I just have this thing to say. It has given 150 million rupees lent or given to government. It has the fonds propres. If you look at its last accounts in June 2019, Bank of Mauritius had a fonds propres to 28 million rupees. Of these 28 billion rupees, 28 billion rupees, it gave 18 billion rupees to the government in December. So it is left now with 10, 11 billion rupees. Let's say it's made some profits on the depreciation of the dollar, but lost also money on its investments. Let's say now it is now 20 billion rupees. A company, a corporation which has 20 billion rupees decides to give a gift to government of 60 billion rupees. Where is the sense in that? Where is the logic in that? Where is the accounting in that, Mr. Speaker? And unbelievable that you would seek, anyone would seek to give away, free time their wealth to somebody else. And therefore the answer, of course, is in the ability of the Bank of Mauritius to print money. It has gifted 3 times what it has in its own shareholders' funds, its own fonds propres, and will print money with all the dangers that come with it in terms of hyperinflation and in terms of depreciation of the rupee. Mr. Speaker, I will finish with this. We had expected a budget that recognized that the greatest asset of Mauritius are not buildings, but its people. The people are the greatest asset. And we would have expected maximum effort, maximum funds to be put on stopping unemployment, which is just en passant, preventing and helping for chômage technique, and I hope that now, after hearing the Minister, some light is being offered, Mr. Speaker. We would have hoped for a budget that prevented, as far as is humanly possible, the closures that are expected in tourism and in the related industries. We would have expected a budget that gave the maximum helping hand to the weakest of this population, the people who will be out of work, who will be needing help, Mr. Speaker. So we would have expected the budget that would have put maximum effort in a massive reskilling of our workforce, prepare them for the new normal, which will be digital more than previously, which will involve new challenges, and also help to solve the historical mismatch, this massive reskilling that has always existed. So we would have expected, instead of a reduction in the education budget, an increase, a large increase in the education budget. Okay, I'm finished, Mr. Speaker. Just to say this, I won't be able to finish completely, but I will say that I will ask the government to extend all the current youth employment programs, the back-to-work programs, the graduate employment schemes that are maybe ending up to December 2020. Extend them for a further year, because you do not want any youth at the moment, which are 23% unemployment. You don't want them sur le pavé, because for sure they will not get another job and they will go into drugs, into alcoholism, etc. So these programs, which will last 1 or 2 years, would need, Mr. Speaker, I will not have time to finish, it doesn't matter, but because I need to give time to my colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I'll finish on the Riambel issue. Government has no right, I may have a legal right in Riambel and in Pointe-aux-Sables, may have a legal right to, although they did not have a legal right during the COVID, but may now have a legal right to evict these people. They do not have a moral right. Until and unless you develop and propose and put into action a decent housing policy, you have no right to evict people. And don't tell me that you'll be doing 12,000 houses for 12 billion rupees, 1 million rupee per house. Then what will you get after the infrastructure and all that is taken out? You will get, what is, let the minister come and explain on Monday when he speaks, what he is proposing as a house that is going to cost, after withdrawing infrastructure, etc., something like 700,000 rupees per house. What will the minister propose? Is it high-rise? Are we going to see the Chinese again here, building high-rise? Are we going to see ghettos? Because what I fear most is that when constructing housing, we in fact end up constructing ghettos. Mr. Speaker, so I will finish on that, and I'll finish, Mr. Speaker, to say that today my thoughts are with the 158 people living rough in Riambel, under these cold winds. And the 100 people in Pointe Sable, which are doing the same, my thoughts and my prayers are with these poor families, hoping, Mr. Speaker, sir, that somehow we'll be able to help them and help them on their way to prosperity. Thank you, sir.